presentation screen right here. This is a wildflower I found over J.B. Little Road. If you're not familiar with it, I'll be showing you more about it. This is a beautiful plant called gold thread. And I've only, in all my walks that I've done 50 or 60 walks since the beginning of March or so forth, I've only found this in one place. It's a tiny plant. It's only about 5 inches tall, but wow. The tail of the blossom is amazing. Okay, and for the wildflower people, I mean, I've been leading trips for Mass Audubon and so forth since 1985, and I've always been interested in wildflowers, but haven't really studied them as much as I have this last year. I'm doing a project throughout the year on well, Essex County wildflowers. So if I have different names than you maybe you're familiar with, the resources I'm using are the Wildflowers of New England, which is a relatively new book, it's spectacular. And then the Flora Novae Anglii, which is really a major college level text, but this is where I'm getting the names. So if you know it by a different name, that's fine. If I have misidentified something, I'd really appreciate your helping with me with that too. So let's just talk about where we're going. This is special places near home, and these are places less traveled. I went to all of these places this morning except for the right-hand corner, which is Rough Meadows. I didn't go there today, but all the other ones I went to today. And believe it or not, they're still there, which is good. And these places are less traveled. I only saw one parked car in any of the places I stopped. If it's well, I'm 75. I consider myself old, and they're talking about the possibility of another peak of this this pandemic, or maybe coming back in this current wave. So I really tried to focus on where could we go in places that are very less traveled, but are spectacular. So you'll notice I don't have Plum Island on there, because that can be incredibly busy. I don't have Maudsley, although there are places in Maudsley that you can go and stay somewhat to yourself. The parking lot's always very, very crowded. And I don't have Martin Burns. Those are all very good places for people to go, especially if you go early in the morning. But I wanted to focus on places that are less traveled and a little bit further away that, again, you could go to some of these places and walk for a couple hours and not see anybody. So as you'll see, I have the Quaker Cemetery, Pikes Bridge Road, the Ordway Reservation, South Street Woodlands, then more to the left, Ash Street Swamp, J.B. Little Road, and Crane Neck Street. And then the right-hand side is Rough Meadows. So an interesting tour, if you're living in Newburyport, for example, is you go out west on Route 113, go over 95, and just a mile or so is Turkey Hill Road on your left-hand side. You just follow Turkey Hill Road and it will take you right by the Quaker Cemetery, by Pikes Bridge Road, by Ordway Reservation, and then you come out and you join South Street. You go by the South Street Reservation, drive a little bit further, go out Ash Street through the swamp, and over to Crane Neck Street and J.B. Little. It's a really beautiful tour. And then on a separate trip, you could go down to Rough Meadows. So that's where we're going today in this program. So if you go out Hale Street, which is very typically, if I'm doing this tour, I go out Hale Street. For me, it's very convenient. And Hale Street then joins Turkey Hill Road coming down from the north, and then it goes further to the south, and Middle Street that goes west, except Middle Street is blocked off. The Plumbers Spring Bridge is out of repair, and you can walk there, except that, to me, it often gets quite busy. But anyway, if you just turn left, if you come down Hale Street, or if you come down Turkey Hill Road and continue, you can go by the Quaker Cemetery. And this is just a small parcel, but I find it very interesting. And if you go there, you might want to pay your respects to Sarah Sawyer and Stephen Saunders Sawyer. And I find it tragic. The history is interesting. Here's a little boy that died at 2 years and 2 months in 1862, and then an unnamed infant, you know. And there's Sarah Saunders, who lived to age 94. So just find that interesting. And if you just pay your respects to these folks and walk a little bit through the cemetery, you'll see some of these bluets, or the other name for them, I purposely put it here, called Quaker ladies. That would be appropriate for the Quaker cemetery. And it's interesting that gets its name, Quaker ladies, because the mittens, as in the picture on the left here, I guess is supposed to represent the hats of Quaker ladies that had traditionally worn that color and so forth. Or they also consider that the color, that blue color, was typical of traditionally of the fabrics worn by Quaker ladies. So that's how that gets that name. And if you just walk through the cemetery, you'll see a Canada Mayflower. This is a plant I've been watching. This is an evergreen plant that I've been watching since February. And it's just now come into blossom. So it's one of these things that I keep going to the same places, wanting to photograph the flowers. It seems to take forever for it to blossom. But notice those flowers, they're absolutely incredible. White circles with all these arrays coming off like antennae. It's just amazing. And they are in full blossom right now. So it's a really beautiful time to go. The scientific name simply means May blossom, which they do in this latitude, and from Canada. So in every place that is on my itinerary, you will see these, and it's really the time to get out and see them because they're beautiful right now. The whole plant, maybe 6 inches tall. That's it. So that's one. And then if you just go through the cemetery and you just want to have some peace and quiet and time, you're looking at the Upper Artichoke Reservoir. So just wander out there and pay your respects to the folks that are buried there, and then have a time to just overlook this beautiful place. By the way, there is a pair of mute swans that have raised, as I saw, there were 4 cygnets there yesterday when I was seeing them. So very often you'll see them in the reservoir here. So just going down a little bit further down Turkey Hill Road, you come to Pikes Bridge Road. And there's no signpost or anything there, but it's very well marked. There's a big parking area right there. And notice that Pikes Bridge Road goes from Turkey Hill Road over to Garden Street, except it's blocked off on both ends because it's not accessible to vehicles. But it makes it a very, very good place to walk. Pikes Bridge Road can get busy at times, especially with the bird watchers in early May. But most of them are gone. But it's a beautiful place to walk. Easy parking. And even if there are other people there, the road is wide enough that you can keep your distance. So in the parking lot, this is a blue-gray gnatcatcher. Every year, for as long as I can remember, blue-gray gnatcatchers, again, the size of a chickadee, weigh about the same size as a chickadee, but they're skinnier and have longer tail. This is the male because he has the black on the forehead, but they were making the nest. Notice it's made out of lichens and cobwebs. And it's tiny. And as I was watching it, this blue-gray gnatcatcher, it flew right at me like this. Blue-gray gnatcatcher. And this is Pikes Bridge Road. So you get a pretty good sense of, it's a really nice place to walk. It's wide open. Even if you encounter somebody along the way, you can make space for them. And lots of wildflowers along the edge and a lot of birds. So, and you walk in a few hundred yards and it's the wetlands, which is part of the Artichoke Reservoir. But it's really nice place just to stand, and typically here you hear Baltimore Orioles singing. There's a lot of Baltimore Orioles in that area. This is the male. And so they come back in early May, sometimes at the very end of April. And that's before the leaves are out even. And what they're doing is they feed on the pollen of a lot of these trees that have their blossoms prior to leafing out. If you want to attract some to your backyard, you might want to put out a half an orange. Okay, if you have them, they have a beautiful song. Notice the bill of that silver blue on that male. During the non-breeding season, that bill is not that bright and shiny. But during the height of the breeding season, a lot of birds, they call the bill and eyes and things like that are called soft parts. It was pretty hard, but in any case, to distinguish it from the plumage and to advertise breeding readiness, the color of the eye changes, the color of the legs in a lot of species, and the color of the bill will change color. Advertising to a potential mate that I'm old enough and I know what I'm supposed to do. Okay. So, and as you're walking along, because there's the wetlands, my mother had an old Singer sewing machine. Remember the old Singer sewing machine with the bobbins, and they had a very particular sound? Well, this is what that swamp sparrow sounds like. So if you're walking along Pikes Bridge Road and you hear your mother's sewing machine, it's probably the swamp sparrow. And it has a very well marked, notice the rufous crown that it has, and the rufous in the wings. A very common species around wetlands, freshwater wetlands. So you'll hear them almost for sure if you go in the next couple of weeks. Okay. This is a beautiful wood warbler. This is a warbler that spent its winter in Central and South America. So this bird could well have spent its winter in Venezuela or Colombia and has just made its way back. In terms of its mass, it's the same size as a chickadee. And this is the male, and this is common yellowthroat. It has a very distinctive song. It says, witchity, 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 witchity. So again, this is one of those birds that you probably could identify by song just by walking along Pikes Bridge Road. The female is really quite drab, has cryptic plumage. She doesn't have the, she has yellow on the front, but it's not as bright, and she doesn't have the mask. But she's really feisty. If you get anywhere near her nest, oh, she defends it ferociously. Here's a bird that weighs 1/3 of an ounce. On somebody like me who weighs 225 pounds or something. So, you probably, if you're feeding birds, you probably have goldfinches coming to your feeder. They're, at this time of year, they're just beautiful. And if you haven't put out a feeder, it's a really good idea. You could, if you go to Steve Grinley, you know, the Birdwatcher Supply and Gift, it's just a little bit south of the Route 1 traffic circle, Newburyport. You don't have to go in the store. You just want some seed or a feeder, they can set you up for it. He'll come put it in your car for you. But they're coming to our feeder here in Newburyport. It's so much fun to watch them. Okay, then I also note for you the other end, the west end of Pikes Bridge Road. You can walk from the east end all the way to the west end. It's a nice walk in there. But if you don't want to walk so far, but you still want to get down to the water, you could go to the west end, which is on Garden Street. If you go south on Garden Street, you'll go by Rogers Street, and then there's a gate, as I remember, it's sort of a reddish gate, metal gate on the left-hand side. And you can park there. There's room for like 2 or 3 cars only, and you can walk in there, and that's what this path looks like. Again, it's a beautiful place to walk. After a rain, it can be a little bit muddy, but nothing to concern yourself. But as you walk in, there's a small stream that comes along the side of the path, along the side of the road. And I just took that image. I thought it was pretty. And so this is where I found my first Jack in the Pulpits. And boy, if you like Jack in the Pulpits, this is the place to go. There are just lots of them just along the trail. And from where you park the car on Garden Street to the Jack in the Pulpits is probably less than 100 feet. I mean, there's just lots and lots of them in there. And it's one of those really special plants. Anyway, and I found our first, most of these American trout lilies have gone by now, okay? But if you walk in, notice in the left image, the color of the leaves. You see how they're blotched with sort of that dark greenish, grayish, whatever color you want to call that? And they get the name trout lily because the coloration of the leaves reminded somebody of the coloration that would be on the fish, the trout. If you see some of the brown trout and things like that, they sort of have this mottled appearance on their sides, and that's where they get that name. So in the left image, the flowers are not quite mature yet, and in the left image and in the right one, that's when they are fully formed and ready for breeding time. Okay, I was in there the other day and had this beautiful black and white warbler. This is the male. The female is very similar to this, but again, the plumage is more muted. And I want you to notice its hind tones, the hallux, H-A-L-L-U-X. That's the hind toe. You may notice they're very long, okay? Well, this gives this ability. This is one of those birds that will walk along tree limbs, but also come head first down a tree. Well, if all the other birds, like the woodpeckers and all the other warblers, are going up the tree, which they typically do, well, here's a huge selective advantage for a bird that goes in the other direction. It's looking for things that birds that are going up the tree have missed. And it has that adaptation, that very long toe at the back, which helps them hold on when they're coming down a tree head first. And there's another bird very like that, which comes to your feeders probably. This is the white-breasted nuthatch. And guess what? It feeds in exactly the same way, and it has exactly the same adaptation, that very long hallux or hind toe, 3 toes forward, 1 back, that lets it come down trees head first. And by the way, as we're looking at these things, these are dinosaurs. All these birds are dinosaurs. Dinosaurs also had 4 toes. They also walked on their toes. And so what we're just seeing are avian dinosaurs. So if you have grandkids or things like that, and you want to impress them with the fact that you saw dinosaurs, well, this is in fact one. Okay. So going a little bit further on this map, it says Turkey Hill Street. Every other map says it's Turkey Hill Road, but in any case, this is one of these extraordinary properties owned by Essex County Greenbelt. And just like to put in a little pitch for these conservation organizations, the Essex County Greenbelt and Mass Audubon. If you walk on these properties, it'd be really great to be a member, especially at this time in this pandemic. All these organizations need membership desperately. So I think it would be a good idea if you can to be a member. And you'll notice in my presentation, a number of these properties are in fact Essex County Greenbelt properties. It's very easy to get to. You just drive down out of Newburyport, out of exit 57, or come out of Scotland Road and go to exit 56. And in the case if you're coming out Scotland Road or coming north from the north, you turn right onto Turkey Hill Road. It's very, and this is the map. Notice you have the parking area in the lower left-hand corner, and you have a trail that goes in, and then you have a loop trail. So this is really nice. The first part of the trail looks like this. It's grassland, tall buttercups, those types throughout the field here. Leafy spurge, I know most people don't like it, hey, but it's a wildflower. You can walk through the field, and around in the field, I've seen these. This is red-tailed hawk. This is an immature bird that loves to feed in these open grasslands and along the forest edges, where it can sit up in this case in a juniper tree and just look for rabbits and squirrels, snakes, and things of that nature. And here is that same bird in flight. And you might notice the beautiful aerodynamic shape of this bird. Notice that the head is rounded and then the body bulges out a little bit. And then you have leads to the tail, a perfect shape of an airfoil, and the cupped wings, which forms the partial vacuum on top of the wing that gives the bird lift. So this is red-tailed hawk. Another thing that you'll see right here, I hear them much more often than I see them. This is song sparrow. It's a very interesting song. It has sort of 3 parts. There's some introductory notes, a jumble, and a trill. So the way I remember it is maids, 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 putting your tea kettle. Okay? So as a way just to remember. And in this case, both males and females sing. So this is one that's marking its territory. And I don't want anybody to tell me that sparrows are not pretty. Sparrows are not plain and drab. They're magnificent. Beautiful. This is a very common one in our area. This is eastern kingbird. This is a bird of the open areas, around fields, field edges, Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, around Ordway, wherever there's trees along an open field or along a marsh, you'll get kingbird. This is a bird that winters in South America and travels all the way back in the springtime for us. And it gets its name kingbird. If you were able to capture this bird, or you were very fortunate during the height of breeding season, the male has a crown, a sort of orangey crown that's hidden underneath the feathers of its head, top of the head. But if you were to capture one, as we do when we're bird banding, and you hold the bird in your hand, and you wet your fingers and rub the top of the head and part the feathers at the top of the head, you can see that little orange crown underneath those feathers. But it only shows that feathers when he's really excited, when he sees a female that is particularly beautiful. He shows the crown as part of the breeding process. Or if he's particularly angry or wants to chase another male, he raises that crown to say, I'm not happy and I don't want you here. Okay? So that's eastern kingbird. Okay. Along the edges of forests, this is one of those tiny little wood warblers. Again, these warblers are so small that you could put 3 of them in a first-class business envelope, put one forever stamp on it, and send them anywhere in the United States. That's how light they are. So these will weigh usually about 10 grams, which is just a little bit more than 1/3 of an ounce. So in a sense, for beautiful chestnut-sided warbler. Now, if you have a garden, you probably don't like woodchucks, but I think they're pretty special. Now, come on, you don't like woodchucks, but you have to admit that's a beautiful animal, isn't it? Beautiful heads, the shape of the head, just in the nose for burrowing in the ground. I mean, talk about being beautifully evolved to do a specific job. That's sure for one. This eastern cottontail. We have two cottontails in New England. This is by far the most common. There's also New England cottontail, which is extremely rare. But it's the New England cottontail is the one of the woodlands. This is the cottontail of the fields. This is a mature animal. Look at the rufous at the back of the head, that beautiful color. We live here in Newburyport, and some people would say we're plagued with them. We just love to watch them. They are so much fun. Just in our backyard here. Now, when it gets in and eats our flowers, we're not going to be so happy, but this is a fun one. And this is a young one, just a tiny one. And it's a beautiful animal. Despite the fact that it eats your lettuce and things in your garden, it's still a beautiful animal. And when you walk into so you walk through the trail, through the field, you go into a little bit of woodland and then through the opening in a fence, and then this loop trail looks very similar to this. And I love, in researching wildflowers and trees and everything, I've been fascinated by the origin of their scientific names. And the scientific name Karya, it comes from, in Greek mythology, Karya, the daughter of a Laconian king, was changed into a walnut tree by Dionysus. Now, Dionysus, that was not very nice to turn somebody into a tree, but that's where that name comes from. So these people who are giving these scientific names had just wonderful imaginations as to how am I going to come up with a genus name. So you go to the ancient Greek and you go to mythology, and that's where you get your names. Okay. So as you're going into the trail in the woodlands, you come through the stone wall, and if you were turned to your right and walk just not even 100 yards, but on your right-hand side is the only patch of this wild columbine that I was able to find. But it's stunningly beautiful. It's a patch of about 5 plants, and it gets its name, the genus name, from the spurs off the back of the blossom that are thought to resemble the talons of an eagle. So that's why this genus name has to do with eagles. So you could go see that. Again, there's only about 5 plants that I could find, but it's right next to the trail, literally within 2 or 3 feet of the trail, and you should be able to find it. Okay. And if you're in the woods, if you hear a beautiful song that reminds you of an American robin, but doesn't sound quite right, it's this fellow. It's the male of the rose-breasted grosbeak. And look how beautiful her female is, that the female is, with the very large bill. Okay. So this is another bird that winters in South and Central America. Okay. And scarlet tanager, typically a bird of the forest. And it has a song, again, that will remind you a little bit of American robin, but it sounds like a robin that has a terrible cold, really sore throat, or very stuffy. It's very, very rough. For a beautiful bird, it has a really rough song. And one of the ways that its call note is very distinctive, and it goes chick-burr, chick-burr. So if you're walking through the woods and you hear that call, that's what you have. This is the scarlet tanager. Chick-burr. Okay, so we come out of Turkey Hill Road, which is sort of in the right near the exit 56 interchange. You just come out Turkey Hill Road, you've left Ordway, you come out to the intersection with South Street, and you take a right-hand turn. And you drive down past Indian Hill Street, and just on your right-hand side, before the road forks again, is South Street Woodlands. So coming from Newburyport, you just either get on 95 and take exit 56, or come out Scotland Road. Scotland Road then turns into South Street. And in a lot of ways, if I could only go to one place in this whole list, I would highly recommend you go here. This is spectacular. Okay? Parking places, 5 or 6 at the max. Okay. So again, you're not going to attract a big crowd anytime. So here is the trail map coming in. The big body of water is, I always know it as Cherry Hill Reservoir, but I think the proper name is Indian Hill Reservoir. And if you notice the map at the bottom right-hand corner, you have parking on the street, on South Street, and then there are these 3 little boardwalks. They are boardwalks, I would say, they are made out of 2x10s with a little spacing in between, or maybe they're 2x8s. So they're pretty narrow, but they're perfectly safe, and you get to cross over 3 small wetlands that contain some really interesting plants. You go in a little way and the trail forks, and you have this big loop trail that you can take. And so this is what the boardwalk looks like, and this is lots and lots of skunk cabbage. I'll get to more about skunk cabbages in a minute, but this is a fascinating plant. For me, among the wildflowers that I photographed starting when there was still snow on the ground, this is the first one I saw, the skunk cabbage. Okay. Anyway, this is what the boardwalks look like, and you can get a good feeling for it. And here is the skunk cabbage. And skunk cabbages are very interesting because if you go to a wetland in the end of February, beginning of March, you'll see skunk cabbages, even when there's still ice on the marsh, because these plants can generate their own heat. So during the fall, what they do is they actually withdraw themselves down into the soil. And they can come out and emerge when it's still February, when we're still having ice and cold and everything, because these plants are actually generating their own heat. And so you'll see an ice-covered area with right in the middle of open space with the skunk cabbages right in the center. If you look at the image on the right-hand side, notice that white, that's the flower inside. It's protected inside this little roof. So skunk cabbages, fascinating. And you walk along the boardwalk. I took this image, actually these images at the second boardwalk. There's this large stand of these blue marsh violets. And one of the characteristics of these, first of all, they typically grow in very wet areas. And the other thing is the flowers on these very long stems, which are much higher than are the leaves. And if you notice the blossom also, notice how they're light blue at the end of the petals and keep darker and darker as they get towards the center. those are all good field marks for this really, really beautiful violet. Okay. And this is, I was so happy to see this. This is the pink lady slipper, or if you look up in most of the books, they actually call it moccasin flower. Again, being relatively new to these and looking these plants up, I couldn't find it in the bird book, in the flower books, because I was looking for pink lady slipper. But the brand new guides don't have it. They have it under moccasin flower. In any case, it's an amazing plant. I watched this plant when it, even before the blossoms started to open. And now if you go back and look at this blossom now, it's a much redder pink. It really turned much darker. It's extraordinary. So if you were to take this walk, you'd go across the 3 boardwalks and you'd go enter in between an opening in the stone wall, and you can either go right or to the left. If you go left and walk, I would say 50 or 60 feet, certainly less than 100, there's a large rock on the left-hand side of the trail, and within 10 feet of that rock is this lady slipper. I did a circuit looking just for wildflowers in general, and I think I counted 14 of these pink lady slippers in the loop in the South Street woodlots. It looks beautiful plant. By the way, these are not transferable, transplantable. They are protected by state and federal law. And those little hairs that you might be able to see on the images here, for some people get a very severe rash from them. In any case. Okay. But walking through this property, you might notice that I took this a couple weeks ago before the leaves have really come out. The place is just filled with these glacial erratics, these huge chunks of granite that were ripped out of the mountains somewhere up in New Hampshire or Vermont, and were carried down in the southeasterly direction out of the mountains on top of these glaciers. And when the glaciers stopped and started to melt, they just dropped all these great big rocks. And I think this is just an extraordinary one, but walking around in the woodlot, you'll see lots of them. Okay. And on some of these rocks, this is rock tripe. There are many different species of these rock tripe, T-R-I-P-E. And I don't want to eat them, but apparently they are edible if you prepare them in a proper way. This is a symbiotic relationship between an alga and a fungus. The fungus is what's producing the shape of it, and the alga is what's producing the food. And they're very slow at it, but they actually erode the rocks away. It's one of the many forces that are working on these rocks to make big rocks into small rocks. Anyway, but you'll see on some of the bigger rocks, you'll see this rock tripe. It's very fortunate to get this this image. This is a really secretive thrush. This is called Veery, but it has one of the most beautiful songs. I went to almost all these sites today, and I heard them at 3 of the different sites. First of all, its call is a call note for which it gets its name. It's veer, veer. So if walking through the woods and hear a veer, that's what this bird is. But its song, if you want to remember it, it's like, think of water going down the drain of your bathtub, okay? It goes down, as it's coming down the scale. It's just beautiful. Notice how the size, big eye for the size of the head, because this is a bird of the deep forest. Okay. Black-cap chickadees, if you've been feeding chickadees, you probably haven't seen as many now, because these chickadees have left your backyards and are now breeding. There are 2 chickadees. Notice the one on the outside of the cavity, and notice that there's one on the inside. Okay, so they're very interesting. When you watch them build their nests, they will excavate these holes in the side of a rotting tree. It has to be soft, but they just don't peck at the hole and then drop the sawdust, if you wish. They will chip away at it, grab a mouthful of that sawdust that they've done. They fly away from the nest cavity and drop it, and then fly back. because they're trying to conceal the location of that nest cavity from predators. So they don't want all the shavings or whatever you want to call it on the ground around the base of the tree. So this is morning cloak butterflies. Some of these overwinter as butterfly, and I saw one of these right here at the woodlots, Street woodlots. Also saw them at J.B. Little Road. Well, this is morning M-O-U-R-I, like you would wear to a funeral or something. Okay. So leaving that area, we're working our way over to Ash Street Swamp. This can be a busy place. This is what Ash Street looks like. It's a dirt road that goes, and sometimes during the early spring, it's actually closed to vehicle traffic because the water level gets such that it's covered by water. You would do best going early in the morning and on a weekend when there's less traffic, because cars can go by there fairly fast. It's pretty dusty, but anyway, this is what it looks like. But notice these open areas with the lily pads and the beaver lodge. And just to the right of the beaver lodge, notice there's a duck box. That's for wood ducks, and also for hooded mergansers. Use those cavities. So this is swamp. But if you want to see a lot of birds like marsh wren, this guy is clinging on to two of these cattails, singing away. And when he sings, it's beautiful because he just shakes all over. You wonder, he shakes so much, some parts are going to start falling off. It's just wonderful. And so I describe its song as a burst of bubbles. Okay? When it sings, it sings completely. It's a wonderful song. So this, to me, has to be one of the most beautiful birds in the world. Just this beautiful black, iridescent black at the height of the breeding season, and the red and yellow on the epaulets. Now, when he's displaying, protecting a territory, he typically has 2 or 3 female partners, and he defends basically their territory. They're very secretive. They look same shape, but they look like a big stripy sparrow. And they're very hard to see because they're on their nests. They're being very secretive. And he's displaying and defending territory for them because they need to be able to find food for themselves and for the young ones. But that epaulet, that redness that you see, if that male red-winged blackbird is just flying across the marsh, it conceals that red, because red means I'm ready to fight. By concealing it, it says to any other male red-winged blackbird, hey, no worries, okay? I'm not threatening you. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to compete with you. And it's a selective advantage that, hey, if you want to defend your territory, you better defend your territory. But if you don't want to be fighting all the time, if you don't want a conflict, cover up that red, and nobody's going to harm you. Nobody's going to fight with you. So they figured it out. Anyway, so a beautiful bird. This is the iridescence of the tree swallow. Sometimes in the fall, make sure you go out to the Parker River National Wildlife Refuge, and you can see 40 or 50,000 of them at the end of August, early September. So, and this bird nests, they can't make their own cavities, so they rely on natural cavities and dead old trees. And the swamp has lots and lots of dead old trees. And bluebirds also use those same tree cavities. This is the male. So if on your property, if you have property, you have some old dead trees, if it's causing any safety concerns, of course you have to take it down. But if you don't, if it's not a safety concern, please leave it up, because chickadees and swallows, things use those cavities in those trees for nesting. Now, I just saw these just a week ago, or a week and a half ago. They're now becoming very, very secretive because the males are actually molting now, and they become flightless. And the females are on their nests with young ones. This is the male. And there's the female. Okay. Beautiful. And of course, we love our eastern painted turtles, and Matter of fact, I was driving down Turkey Hill Road, and right in the middle of the road was an eastern painted turtle. So I don't advise you picking it up without having a cloth or a piece of paper or something, but I got out, I have an old piece of paper and picked it up out of the road, moved it down and wanted to get to the wetland for breeding time. Okay, so we're gonna go out, we're going to Ash Street, we're going out Ash Street, we're gonna go to Middle Street. Now you can also approach Middle Street by going out Route 113 to Garden Street, and then take a right-hand street turn onto Middle Street. And we're going to go down to Crane Neck Street. Crane Neck Street comes all the way from Route 113 also. So it's basically, you go to the end of Crane Street, there's a parking area for 3 or 4 cars. There's a gate, again, across there, and an old road that you can walk down. And there's some footpaths, and this is what the trail looks like. And then it's a beautiful trail. It's, for the first time today, I had a few mosquitoes out there, so just be aware of it. But nice place to walk, wide enough trail, okay? And this I found the other day. I was thrilled to see this. I've only found this, I've been able to find this one place. This is nodding trillium or nodding wake robin, okay? And it sounds like a strange name, wake robin, but some of these are more red, and it comes from the English name for the English robin or European robin, and they're reddish. Some of these are reddish, and they remind them of the robin. Okay, it's not our robin; it's a different robin. But this is a really beautiful plant, and this is one that's nodding, and the flower is underneath the leaves. In some cases, on these trilliums, the blossom is above the leaves, but this is so sort of a challenge to take a photograph of the flower because it's always underneath. In any case, okay. And this place is just covered with star flowers. They're just really coming into good blossom now. But this is, I mean, there are hundreds of them. The ground there is carpeted with these Canada mayflowers and now these star flowers, and they're just really coming beautifully. Anyway, look at the beautiful blossom on the right-hand side. Blossom's only about 3/4 of an inch wide. Okay. Now, also walking along the trail, these wooden anemones. Again, you need to go fairly soon if you want to see these wooden anemones, although in this one spot, there's still quite a few of these beautiful wooden anemones. And again, this is another one where, according to Greek mythology, the anemone sprang from Aphrodite's tears as she mourned the death of Adonis, the god of beauty and desire. I think the Greek mythology is every bit as exciting as the flowers. I think it's really fun. But you want to go, you want to see these because it's getting towards the end of their blooming season. And some of these plants that I took photographs with, in a lot of cases, didn't include here because the blossom was only there for 3 days. That's it, gone. Now, if you're walking through this area and in the woodlands, a lot of the woodlands, this is a red-eyed vireo. And believe it or not, the eye is red. And if you're walking, this is a bird that sings well into summertime, where a lot of other birds have stopped singing. And it sings even during the heat of the day. And so if you're walking along and you hear something that sounds like, I'm here, you're there. I'm here, you're there. I'm here, you're there. All the time. This is red-eyed vireo. They can be very difficult to find, but they're easy to hear. So that's one. The other one, walked out there this morning, and there were 3 pairs of gray catbirds. Now they'll sound like everything. They'll sound like vireos. They'll sound like thrushes. Its name is Mimus polyglottis. In other words, the mimic of many voices. And this is in the same family with mockingbird and brown thrasher. When you think of, how can I make something beautiful with gray and black? Well, this is what you get. And notice underneath the tail, the undertail covert's a little bit of rufous, a little bit of reddish. It's called the chrysum. Anyway, it's the feathers underneath the tail that cover up the bases of those tail feathers. So you'll hear them. For certain, you'll hear them when you walk there. Okay. And so from Crane Neck Street, we're going to head over a little bit. This is an unmarked street, but you come out of Crane Neck Street and you turn left, and it's the next street. Or if you were to come out from Route 113, you would take Georgetown Road, and it comes to an end. You cross Middle Street and you go a few hundred yards more, and there's a gate again, JB Little Road. I'd love to take you to where there are gates, because you're not going to have any cars to contend with. Okay, and you can drive in there, and there is a small parking area, and it's right on the border of West Newbury and Groveland. Okay, so as I'm taking you into JB Little Road, we're in Groveland. Okay, and this is an old road. If you want a place where it's easy walking and it's wide open and you don't have to worry about, running into poison ivy or things of that nature, just take a walk down this road. It goes for, I walked it once, maybe 2 miles, okay? And it ends up, I think it's at 5 Star Road. In any case, you can walk along, there's lots of flowers that you can see just from here. Or what I typically do from the parking lot, there's a parking lot there for about 5 or 6 cars, and there's a trail that leads right from that parking lot. It's a really beautiful trail. It's a little bit, if it's wet, it can get a little bit soggy in a few places, but nothing of concern. But if you leave the parking lot, in other words, this road at your back, the road you drove in on at your back, there's a trail. And as long as, once you get like 100 yards past, every other trail junction, you're going to go to the right. You keep going right, okay? It will bring you back to this pathway that you see here, but down about 400 yards. It's a beautiful trail. So if you leave the parking lot, you go on this trail. Once you get past that first trail on your right, which is within about 100 yards, every other time you come to a trail, you go right. You do this beautiful loop around. And in the parking lot, this is Carolina Red, okay? And you probably have some of these in your backyard. And the call is tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle. Very, very strong line over the eye. And in the parking lot, that's typically what you hear. And I was walking down the road and I watched this chipping sparrow. Its song is chip, 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 chip. It's always the same. Every chipping sparrow in the world sounds exactly the same. It's one of the few birds that has only one song. But notice it's been collecting up these fibers here in its bill before making its nest. It lines its nest with these very fine fibers. So chipping sparrow. And this is Phoebe. If you're familiar with chickadees, they whistle. I can't whistle, but they whistle Phoebe. Phoebe say Phoebe, they say Phoebe. Phoebe, very raspy Phoebe. Okay. If I catch her. And through all of your walks, if you are not having, we used to have lots of tufted mouses coming to our feeder. We don't have any anymore because they've left your backyard and they're out in the forest now nesting. But you'll hear them. Their song is sometimes reminds you of a cardinal, but its song is Peter, 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 where a cardinal will go Peter, 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 Peter. Okay, but you'll hear these for certain if you go on any of these walks. I was out there today, and now you can say it pileated woodpecker, or you can say pileated woodpecker, or you can say big woodpecker, whatever you want to do, it all works. But this happens to be the male. Notice right behind the bill, that red area, he has that red area, the female does not. And if you're walking in the woods and you hear just a little tap, 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 that's a downy woodpecker. If you hear somebody hitting a tree with a sledgehammer, it's this guy, okay? And he was there today. Pileated woodpecker, crested. Pileated means crested, or it actually comes from the Latin, It means cap in, and some people say it also comes from the crest that the legionnaire, the Roman legions, had these crests on their helmets that were red. So that was called a pileus. So anyway, but you just walk through and you get these little stone walls that testifies to the fact that this is all grazing land at one time. Okay. And this is the first point when I first started going there. This was back in at the end of February, early March, is you get this lesser periwinkle or myrtle, creeping myrtle. And by far the vast majority of them are blue. But every once in a while, you will come across a small stand of these white ones. I mean, I would say for every 100 of these blue ones, you see one of these white ones. Anyway, when you're going out early spring and you're hoping for wildflowers, this is a nice one to see. It's okay. It's an introduced species. It's still beautiful. Okay. So if you go walking in the woods, even now, okay, this is partridge berry. And I love those leaves, the almost perfectly round and with that beautiful yellow vein through the center. And if you walk out there, you will see the berries are still there. And this was the genus for this whole group of plants is named after John Mitchell, who was a colonial botanist. So anyway, I just love this name, Episawa, okay? And I've been watching these plants since early March. And the genus names from the Greek for winter weather and philia, or like Philadelphia, okay, to love. It's a plant that is evergreen, so it loves the winter. That's where it gets its name from. And Pipisawa comes from Abnaki name for the flower of the woods. I think they were courteous enough to use a First Nation name for this beautiful plant. And by the way, what you're seeing in the image is the seed head from last year. If you look at the bottom, just above the leaves, you'll see a bud that's just forming. I was out there today and looked at this very plant, and they're beginning to start the blossoms. But the blossoms and the flowers don't usually come until late June, early July, but it has an extraordinarily beautiful blossom. And so I'm looking forward to seeing it later on. So anyway, I have this on the image of the beginning. This is this incredibly beautiful gold thread. Again, I found only 2 very small stands of this. This plant is only about 5 inches tall. But talk about putting a lot of effort into an extraordinary blossom. That's certainly it. And again, the name comes from coptis, from being cut, and then trifolia, notice very distinctive 3-toothed leaves or 3-lobed leaves. Okay. I found this plant, I found one of these plants in all my walks, no matter where I've walked. And this is ginseng, the dwarf variety. This is only up about 5 inches tall. And these ginseng plants have become very, very rare now because they, panacea, it's a cure. Apparently, no matter what's wrong with you, if you suck on one of these things, you're going to be well and healthy, and you lose 25 years off your age. I mean, it's just whatever. But anyway, but that's why they're so rare in the wild, is because they were collected so much. But it has this really beautiful blossom. And at my age, 75, it's getting tough to be able to get down in order to get these close-ups of these flowers. In any case, so this is bloodroot is all gone by now. The flowers have all gone by, but no matter if you walk, you can still see the leaf that's on your right-hand side, a very distinctive leaf. And what you want to do is walking through the woods, look for this extraordinary leaf. And if you look to the right of it, there is the seed capsule is developing. So that's where the flower used to be. So the flowers are gone, but you can still search for these beautiful palmate leaves. If you look at the image on the left-hand side, notice how the leaves have enclosed, like wrapped arms around the stem. And it gets, notice the genus name for blood, because if you break the stem, it has sort of an orangey, reddish sap. I don't want to do that. I take the word for it. Okay? I love chipmunks. Anybody like chipmunks? This chipmunk like this one has dug this incredible hole right in the middle of our garden. And during the winter, when I put birdseed out, it come back, stuffed his cheeks just full with seeds and carried down the hole. So he must have about 75 pounds of seed down there. In any case, okay. So that's sort of our expedition out to sort of central Essex County. But I'd like to take you out now down to Rowley. So we're going to go out of Newburyport. We're going to go down High Road, Route 1A. We're going to cross over the Parker River, for which Parker River National Wildlife Refuge gets its name. We cross from Newbury, right about where it says Route 1A on my map here on the left-hand side, is where the border is between Rowley and Newbury. And we're going to come down to Stackyard Road. You may be familiar with what used to be called the Pikel Farm. It's now part of, what is the big farm in Newburyport? Anyway, Crop Farm. Okay, you go down to Stackyard Road and you go in a few hundred yards and the road forks. If you take the left fork, that's Patmos Road. And Patmos Road, as you can see, goes down and ends at Sawyer Island, which is part of those wildlife sanctuary. Or if you go to the right, Stackyard Road, and you could go to the end, and there's another gate, but you can walk beyond that gate, and that's Nelson Island, out to Nelson Island. Before Mass Audubon has reopened the Rough Meadows Wildlife Sanctuary, so you can walk in there. But before it was opened, my wife and Marcia and I would walk along Patmos Road and Stackyard Road. So you park your car near the junction of Stackyard Road and Patmos Road and walk out to the end. It's about, and back again, it's almost 2 miles. So it makes a nice walk through woodlands and then through salt marshes. Anyway, let's go here to, so I've taken a left-hand turn onto Patmos Road. And this is an area that's Rough Meadows Wildlife Sanctuary. Now this is when I was Sanctuary Director at Joplin Flats, we got this property from the Chandler family. Very generous donors to many causes, PB the Essex Museum, to Land Trust, everywhere. They're just really great people. In any case, they gave us parcels of this land to become a new wildlife sanctuary. Well, as it turns out, Essex County Greenbelt and Mass Audubon would often own parcels next to each other. So as I was trying to lay out a trail system, I couldn't do it without crossing their property. So we came to the agreement that we would merge properties in this area together and call it the Rough Meadows Wildlife Sanctuary, and they could take credit for it and we could take credit for it, and everybody's just as happy as can be. And we put trail system then across the property. So as you can see, there's the parking area, and then there's the trail system that I worked with the town of Rowley to set up. So here's the gate. We love gates. Again, nobody can drive in after you. But this is a road called, the original name for this road that you see here was Far Division, F-A-R, Division Road. And why Far Division? Well, when the town of Rowley was dividing up the salt marshes, they had the division near town, and then they had the one that was subby out of town, and then they had the Far Division, the one that was far away. And so this became Far Division and Far Division Road. But when I was setting up this sanctuary and setting up the trail system, I consulted with the Chandler family as to some names. What kind of names would you like for the sanctuary you've just donated for us? So they pondered it for a little while, and they said, well, when Professor Chandler was a professor of economics at Harvard University, by the way, he said, well, when he took his short walk, he would just walk down Patmos Road. But when he went for his long walk, he would walk out through the salt marsh and then back up Far Division Road. So I figured what better name than to name his trail than Professor Chandler's Long Walk, and that's where it gets the name. The point being is that this is very well signposted. So you want to walk out there. And so you walk out a few hundred yards along this trail, and you actually come to a platform, a very nice platform. You might want to pack up a lunch or your coffee and donuts or whatever. Park at the Joppa Flats, at the Rough Meadows, walk down the trail and stop at this, just before this, where I've taken this image right now, there's a beautiful deck that you can sit on overlooking the salt marsh. Take a picnic lunch out there. It's, I would say, walking time, if it takes you 5 minutes, that's probably more than you need. A few hundred yards and you have a beautiful place to sit and anyway. But if you want to go any further, there is this tidal creek that comes across the road, and there's a very clear warning sign that says to you, beware of high tide, because when the tide comes in, the water in this little gully here is about 3 feet deep. Go there at low tide or when the tide is going out. Some of the flowers that you'd see along Patmos Road and Stackyard Road, this was an early one. The blossoms are all gone, but the seed heads that look like a dandelion are still visible, as are now the leaves. In the early part of the season, you never see the leaves. The leaves are not there. So it goes through the blossoming and fruiting before the leaves are even visible. But this is coltsfoot, and it gets its name in theory because the leaves look like a coltsfoot. Okay, you equestrians, you can tell me whether it looks like one or not. Anyway, that's it. But this was a very important plant in pharmacology, in drugs. It was used for curing coughs. Okay, the part of the genus name means cough, and then to cast out, it means to get rid of your cough. And then its specific name, the ferrifera, again, has to do with becoming agitated or talkative, meaning that it cures your throat so you can talk. Okay. Now, most of these plants are gone by, but there's still a few. Okay. This is sessile-leaved bellwort. And again, another interesting one here having to do with, if you know the doctrine of signatures, which says God put everything on the earth and for a purpose, for human purposes, and all we had to do was figure out what they were for, but God gave us everything we ever would need. And so the bud looks like sort of that fleshy part in the back of your throat at the soft palate. And so probably if there's anything wrong with your throat or the back of your mouth, this plant probably was a cure for it. And anyway, that's doctrine of signatures. It's not somebody signing us something, it's the doctrine of signs. Okay. So if something looked like a liver, and like liverwort, then probably that was a good thing. That must probably is a drug to cure a liver illness. Okay, so this is Solomon seal. This is the false Solomon seal. False Solomon seal has its flowers at the end of the stalk, where the true Solomon seals have it at along the stem, among the leaves. But this is Starry's false Solomon seal. And again, if you go soon, you will find these still. They're still blossoming. Okay. And high bush blueberries. Okay. And again, such a beautiful blossom. And I love this plant because why should you have only one shaped leaf when you can have three? I mean, why be ordinary? And so this is sassafras. And it, notice it has the three-lobed leaf. It has the simple leaf, and the one that looks like a mitten, all on the same plant. And I was fortunate to get an early image. You could see the leaves are just emerging, and those are the flowers of the sassafras. So here's a tree, a small shrub, that has really beautiful flowers. Okay. Okay. Now this is sarsaparilla, the wild type, also called Virginia sarsaparilla. Yeah, you can make drinks out of the roots and things like this. But during the early 18th century, this was the second most important export of the colonies to Europe. This was an extraordinarily important commercial product. And you wonder why? What would this be good for? Well, among other cure-alls, this was the cure-all for syphilis, for venereal disease, syphilis, okay? And so syphilis was rampant in Europe. There was no cure for it, but this was thought to be a cure for a number of diseases, including syphilis. So for a period of time, this was it was second only to tobacco in terms of its export value. If you walk out, I love ferns. Well, since a teenager, I've just been interested in ferns. I had this wonderful mentor, a woman by the name of Farida Wiley, who was expert on plants, and she introduced me to ferns. And I think so on the left-hand side, this is interrupted fern. Notice the fern grows and it has the sterile frond. Then in the middle of the frond is the fertile part of the frond, and then it's sterile again. So it's interrupted. The frond is interrupted by the pinnate portions of the fern with the pores that are bearing the sori, which produces the spores, not seeds, spores. And then very closely related to that one is another beautiful fern. This is cinnamon fern. And in that case, on the fronds, either the frond is all sterile or all fertile. And it gets this beautiful cinnamon color on the fronds. It also has scales on the stems that are cinnamon color. But take a walk out there. They're beautiful. Okay. I was walking there the other day, and this is oak apple gall. They come in different varieties. And this is probably usually by a wasp or a midge that lays the eggs on the leaf or on the stem of typically on an oak tree. And, you know, we think we humans are really smart. And for like the last 20 years or something, we've been doing genetic engineering. Well, for tens of millions of years, these little wasps and midges have been doing genetic engineering themselves. They actually force these plants to produce these galls. And inside that gall is a tiny larva of a wasp or a midge, and talk about protection. So it gets its nutrients from inside that gall, and when it comes time to emerge, it makes a little hole and comes out of that gall. Anyway, I love beetles. This is a six-spotted tiger beetle. This is a predaceous one. A lot of beetles eat, sap out of plants, and eat larvae, eat leaves and things. But notice you might be able to see there's two very obvious, and then a third spot on this six-spotted tiger beetle, also six-spotted green tiger beetle, its name. This is a predaceous one that eats other insects, and they're incredibly fast. But this is the roadway, and if you walk down the street or at the boardwalk at the woodlots, I've seen them there. They're incredibly fast, but they have this iridescent. Some of these tiger beetles are blue. And if you see them, if you go out on the beach sometime and see tiger beetles, they're sand colored. So, okay, we're coming near the end here, but as you walk along, this is whether you're walking at a Patmos Road or Stackyard Road, or I heard several of these when I was out at, let's see, well, anyway, going out Crane Neck Street. This is a towhee. It's in the sparrow family, and it has a very clear, it has a song that's easy to recognize. It goes, tea, tea, drink your tea, drink your tea, drink your tea. So anyway, if you hear that, that's what you have. This is eastern towhee. Out in the salt marshes, if you see a bird that says, will it, will it, will it, will it, you didn't even have to figure out what it is. He told you who he is. Okay, this is Willet. And this is one of the shorebirds that actually nests in our wetlands. Great egret, which goes in the salt pans, and snowy egret. And coming to the end. And for some of you folks, I'm sure for many of you, this is a hateful plant. This is one that you don't particularly like. But to me, looking at it, if you new to really focusing on plants, I think it's extraordinarily beautiful. This is the blossom on the left-hand side and the seed head. I mean, this is something like, is it Jehuli that makes these things out of glass? I mean, sort of reminded me of. And I'm sure I think most of you probably recognize that that is a dandelion, okay? Incredibly beautiful. But I want to bring you focus in on its scientific name. Okay, it means medieval word for a bitter herb, but the specific name means official as used in the pharmacological sense. In other words, this was a highly valued plant. Vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D. It's good for all kinds of ailments. And actually the name originally comes out of the Persia because it was part of the name for this plant was part of their pharmacology listing of the most valuable plants. So we disdain dandelions in our backyard, but they're really good. And I wanted to end up because these are all highly invasive plants and nobody likes them, but they're all pretty. So Dane's Rocket, I took that over in West Newbury and Hawkweed. It's also called King Devil because farmers don't like it because it gets in their fields and takes over everything. Fig Buttercup, most people don't like it, or lesser celandine because it's invasive and takes over people's gardens. Garlic mustard is just everywhere, but the blossoms are pretty. The celandine and bull thistle, again, farmers hate those too because they take over the fields. In any case, that is my presentation for today. And I've enjoyed being with you.